She knows which mug he'll reach for before he's even fully awake. He hears the front door close and already knows what kind of day she had. They start a story at the same time, make eye contact, and one of them stops because they both already know how it ends. From the outside, that can look like nothing is happening. But that's not nothing. That's 30 years. Modern culture tends to look at couples who've been together that long and land on one of two conclusions. Either they must be deeply, unusually compatible, soulmates in the truest sense, or they stayed out of comfort, out of routine, out of a quiet fear of starting over. One reading is romantic. The other is a little sad. And honestly, both of them are wrong. Because the couples who actually make it 3 decades don't usually describe their relationship the way culture expects them to. They don't talk about being swept off their feet. They don't perform closeness for an audience. They rarely say things like, "We never fight," or "It just works," with the kind of confidence people expect from a love story. What they describe, when they're being honest, is something quieter, harder to explain, something that took years to build and looks nothing like the thing that started it. And that gap, between what love looks like at the beginning and what it becomes after 30 years, is exactly what most people misunderstand. Here's something nobody really explains about the beginning of a relationship. That feeling, the one that makes it hard to concentrate, makes you check your phone every few minutes, makes everything feel slightly louder and more alive. That feeling is neurologically almost identical to stress. The brain in early love and the brain under pressure look remarkably similar on a scan. High dopamine, elevated cortisol, a nervous system running slightly hotter than normal. It's intense, it's consuming, and it was never designed to stay. Not because something went wrong, because that's not what it's for. The intensity of early love exists to pull two people together, to override hesitation, to make the risk of closeness feel worth taking. But once two people are actually together, really together, not just orbiting each other, the nervous system starts doing something different. It starts paying attention, and this is where most people make the mistake. Because when that early intensity begins to soften, modern culture immediately frames it as loss. The relationship is cooling. The spark is fading. Maybe you've grown apart. Maybe you're just not as compatible as you thought. The story we're given says that if it stops feeling electric, something has gone wrong. But couples who stayed together for decades often describe that shift very differently, not as a loss, as a settling, like the difference between a city during a storm and the same city on a quiet Sunday morning. Less dramatic, but actually livable. What moves in when the intensity moves out is something researchers call emotional safety. And it sounds simple until you try to explain what it actually feels like. It's not excitement, it's not passion. It's the specific feeling of being in a room with someone and your shoulders dropping without you deciding to drop them. It's the absence of performance. No managing how you're perceived. No editing yourself before you speak. No wondering how this moment is going to be interpreted. For a lot of people, that kind of safety is rarer than they realize. Because most adult relationships, friendships, work relationships, even family, involve some level of management, some version of yourself you lead with. Long-term couples often describe their partner as the one place they genuinely stop managing. And over time, that stops feeling ordinary. It starts feeling like something they can't imagine losing. But it doesn't come without cost. Because at some point in almost every long marriage, life stops being romantic and simply becomes hard. There are years where money gets tight and both people are scared but don't know how to say it. There are years where one person gets sick and the other one quietly becomes a caretaker without anyone calling it that. There are years where grief enters the house and stays longer than expected. Where a parent dies and the loss is still sitting in the room months later. Where children grow up and leave and the couple is suddenly alone together for the first time in years. Two people in a house that used to be full, figuring out who they are now. These are the seasons modern culture rarely talks about honestly. Because these seasons aren't cinematic. They don't have a soundtrack. Nobody looks back on the year they were both exhausted and think that was the romantic part. But couples who made it through them often describe those years as the ones that changed everything. Not because they were beautiful, because they survived them together. And surviving something together does something to a relationship that nothing else can replicate. It becomes history, and history in a relationship is not just memory, it's structure. There's a concept researchers use when studying long-term couples called self-expansion. The idea is that over time, people in close relationships slowly begin incorporating each other into their own sense of self. Not losing themselves, expanding. The other person's memories start to feel like shared memories. Their experiences become reference points in your own story. Their fears become things you understand without explanation. This is why couples together for decades often shift from speaking in I to speaking in we, not as a performance of togetherness, but because the boundary between individual and shared identity genuinely starts to blur. We went through that. We remember those years. We were different people back then. It's not dependency. It's something more specific. Two people who have been paying close attention to each other for 30 years build a kind of mutual knowledge that has no shortcut. You cannot download it. You cannot fast-track it. It accumulates the way trust accumulates, slowly, quietly, through repetition and time. And then, there's the part that's hardest to articulate, but maybe matters most. Being fully known. Not the version of you that's put together. Not the version that handles things well. The version that was 26 and terrified and pretending not to be. The version that cried in the car before going inside. The version that failed at something important and didn't tell anyone for weeks. The version that was difficult to love during certain years and probably knew it. Most people spend significant energy making sure that version stays hidden because exposure feels dangerous, because being seen clearly by another person without the careful editing, without the distance, is one of the more vulnerable things a human being can do. Long-term couples often describe this as the thing they value most and explain least. Someone who has seen every iteration of who you've been, every phase, every failure, every version you've quietly grown out of. And they stayed. Not because they missed the difficult parts, because they stayed anyway. That kind of continuity becomes harder to replace the older you get. Because it's not just about the person, it's about everything they carry. The years they remember that nobody else fully does anymore. The inside references that don't require context. The specific way they know when you need space versus when you need the opposite, without you having to say either. No new relationship can walk in and offer that. It has to be built. And it takes exactly as long as it takes. So no. If you're still together after 30 years, it probably isn't because of love. Not the version people usually mean when they say that word. It's because love quietly became something else. Something less exciting and far more rare. Someone who stayed long enough to know all of you, and chose to keep showing up anyway.